Welcome to The Lion, the Lamb, and the Lawyer. I'm Matt Benson, and today we're going to do something a little different. Today we're going to talk about 5 reasons that marriages fail. Let me begin by explaining a few things. First, I'm not a marriage counselor. I'm also not one of those guys who pretends his own marriage is perfect and tells people they should do exactly what he does. What my wife and I do works for us. That does not mean it'll work for everybody. I'm also not your pastor, so if you're looking for the Christian's Guide to Love and Marriage, you probably need to look somewhere else. What I am is a lawyer who's handled a lot of divorces. I've seen how expensive it is, I've seen how painful it is, and I've seen the common causes, at least in those cases where the parties are honest with me about it. A lot of the time there's some kind of inciting event that finally breaks the marriage in half, like infidelity or some other kind of betrayal that the couple can't get past. But that final betrayal is usually a product of some kind of root failure that happens a while before that. And those 5 root failures are what I'm going to talk about for the next few minutes. Failure to communicate, failure to maintain, failure to appreciate, failure to sacrifice, and the failure to listen. Now I want you to understand that I'm not going to give you a magic bullet. Avoiding these failures does not guarantee a successful marriage because sometimes things happen that are beyond your control. But your chances are a whole lot better if you avoid these problems. I will also tell you that if your spouse knows that you care about them and that you're trying to be a better spouse all the time, they're probably going to do the same, and that's probably going to help your marriage. The first failure I want to talk about is failure to communicate. Sometimes we assume our husband or wife knows how we feel about them. That's usually a mistake. A lot of people are insecure about their place in a relationship, and unless we remind people that we care about them, they will eventually assume that we don't. Communicating how you feel about someone should take a variety of different forms. You can tell your spouse how you feel either in person, by a phone call, with a text message, or by writing them a note. You can also show them how you feel by spending time with them, buying them gifts, by doing little things to make their lives easier, or by the way you touch them. Different people are more responsive to different types of communication, and you have to test out different things to figure out what your spouse responds to. You'll probably wind up doing some combination of all the things I mentioned previously. I started with communication because I really believe this is one of the most important parts of making a relationship work. I've seen people get over some pretty awful stuff their spouses did when they finally started actually communicating with one another. So if you're going to get one thing right, this is probably the thing you should focus on. The next failure I want to talk about is the failure to maintain. Being married is a perishable skill, like shooting or playing guitar. Going out alone with your spouse should not feel weird to you, and if it does, then it indicates that you've started to lose the intimacy in your marriage, which means you've got some work to do. It's important to be a breadwinner, and it's important to be a parent, but it's also important to stop and take a break from that and focus on being a husband or a wife. You need to take time to remember what you like about one another and remember why you're together. You're going to have to dedicate some time and money to this effort. But this is a little bit of an awkward comparison, but think of maintaining your marriage like regular maintenance on a car. It's a lot cheaper and easier to change the oil when you're supposed to than to have the car break down and have to fix it, and it's surely less expensive and less of a hassle than acquiring a new one. The third type of failure I've seen is the failure to appreciate what you have. We have the tendency to overvalue the things we don't have and undervalue what we do have. The grass often appears to be greener on the other side of the fence, whether it actually is or not. People occasionally get more pleasure out of the struggle of hunting things down than they do actually obtaining them, which is why folks sometimes have affairs with people who are obviously inferior to their spouses. Now, think about that in terms of who you're in a relationship with. Focus on the wonderful things that continue to draw you to your spouse and make a point of appreciating them for who they are. The fourth type of failure is failure to sacrifice. Being successfully married means you can't put your own needs before those of your family. You have to fight off the desire to be selfish, whether that selfishness manifests itself in how you allocate your time, your money, or how you behave in the bedroom. Now, when I talk about sacrifice, that doesn't mean you always have to do what your spouse wants, but it does require that you compromise. Figure out the things that are important to each of you and make decisions based on that. The fifth and the final type of failure is the failure to listen. If you pay attention, people will tell you what they want. Let me explain to you what I mean. I pay attention to what my wife says she wants. Sometimes I even make notes. That way, when I want to make a gesture or buy a gift, I can pretty well knock it out of the park. Here's the mistake a lot of people make. There's a difference between what you think your spouse ought to want and what they actually want. Pay attention and figure out what your spouse is actually looking to get out of you, then figure out how much of that you're willing and able to give them. So let's review. I've seen 5 common reasons that marriages fail. If you can avoid these 5 problems, then your chances of making marriages work are considerably better. First, you have to communicate. You have to tell your spouse how you feel about them. Second, you have to maintain. Your marriage is important and you have to make the relationship a priority. Third, you have to appreciate what you have. Fourth, you have to sacrifice. You can't put your own wants and needs ahead of those of your family. Fifth and finally, you have to listen. Pay attention to what your spouse says and does and use that information to figure out what they actually want from you. Pay attention to those 5 things and you're probably on your way to being a pretty good husband or wife. Now, I know this video wasn't overtly spiritual or theological, but I do think it might be useful to a lot of people. Let me know if you think I left anything out. I started this project because if we don't know why we believe, we don't really know what we believe. If you like this video, please consider sharing it with your friends. You can find The Lion, the Lamb, and the Lawyer on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. We try to put out a new video once a week. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time. I hope you got something out of it.